Hi, I'm Doug, and welcome to Doppler's Gear Garage. In this video, we're checking out the best gear for guitar players from 2019. And what a year it's been. But it's not just the end of a year, it's the end of a decade. A decade that saw new brands like REVV come onto the marketplace. A decade that saw brands like REVV and Fender start building IRs into amplifiers. Saw brands like SHURE becoming part of the content creation game with the MV88 Plus, which I used when I took my Helix, which didn't exist a decade ago, for a swim in the San Francisco Bay and my SKB case. All right, to get the most out of this video, I've done a couple of things. Down below in the show notes, you'll be able to jump to the timeline links that I've created for whatever piece of gear you might want to check out the most. But you're also invited to hang out for the entire video. Speaking of hanging out, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, I'd like to invite you to do so and also ring the bell so I can let you know when some of the very cool gear demos are going to come online. Bunch of stuff is coming. All right, also down below, you're going to see some Amazon affiliate links. I make a little bit of something on the back end, but none of the brands in this video have paid for placement. Make that really clear. All right, the last thing I want to say is also leave some comments about what your favorite piece of gear from 2019 was and why. And with that said, let's get to it. When I heard that Jeff Beck and Joe Perry were using sonotone strings, I was like, send me all you got. And in particular, this is the 2019 release. It's a pure nickel string. As a demo guy, there's certain instruments in my collection that I only put pure nickel on because it has that vintage vibe. And when I put these strings on the Telecaster, it's never sounded better. So if there's a guitar, maybe a custom shop type of deal, that you're going for that vintage vibe, these aren't cheap, but they sound great. And again, they're good enough for Jeff Beck and Joe Perry. The Lincoln Brewster Strat is, in my opinion, the best production Strat on the market for a couple of really important reasons. First of all, the volume control. It's got a push-pull functionality that in the up position gives you 10 dB of boost, the perfect amount of boost to take your amp into solo mode without having to step on a pedal. Hello. Now, the other thing is when that's engaged, you get up to 10 dB of mid-range boost that you can dial in with this control. So you get volume and extra tonal shift when you bring this in. It's awesome. Now, when you're all the way down in the bridge position, that's when the tone control is engaged. So you can kind of tweak the bridge pickup, pull a little bit of the top end off, and it doesn't affect what's going on in the other pickup selections. And speaking of the pickups, DiMarzio Virtual Vintage. Noiseless, they sound great, classic Strat, vintage vibe without the noise. Two-post bridge in combination with a locking tuner stays perfectly in tune. Quarter sawn, kind of gentle V-shaped neck. Maple, one-piece neck I'll add. This thing plays great, sounds great, feels great. And with the functionality here, in my opinion, again, it's the best production Strat on the market. The Steve Wariner Nashville Gentleman is the best GRETSCH I've ever played. It's not a cheap instrument, but it is amazing. First of all, the body's a little bit smaller than a White Falcon, which for many people means it's a little bit more comfortable to play sitting down. Now that said, if standing up and rocking out is your thing, the F-holes are actually faux F-holes. This thing rocks hard. So if like Malcolm and Angus are your thing, this guitar totally goes there. Even though it looks nice and refined, don't believe it. Now, one of the other cool things about it, it's got this push-pull functionality on the tone control, which is a coil split. So basically, in addition to all that classic GRETSCH sound, you've got this other layer of tone that you can fine-tune with the tone control. The tremolo stays in tune, thanks in part to the locking tuners. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's not cheap, but it's a wonderful guitar. And it's honestly the best GRETSCH I've ever played. I put this board together a little earlier in the year for a demo that I did for the RJM Music Technology PBC6X. PBC as in pedal board controller, 6X as in 6 loops with loop reordering. You can actually get a couple more loops than 6, but we're not going to go into that. Now, the loop reordering bit is super important if you like to stack drive pedals because it allows you to swap the order of the pedals. Super cool. It's got a native MIDI and USB jack/port. And the deep editor that goes along with this is amazing. The MIDI implementation is second to none. Crazy. Also, there's one other function that just like, I couldn't believe that they were able to do it. It sends out a tap tempo functionality to non-MIDI pedals like these Boss delays here that you can kind of basically associate with the BPM of a preset, and it sends out a tap tempo message to these pedals. So if I choose 120 BPM, these guys know to beat sync to that. Crazy. Amazing piece of gear. If pedal boards are your thing, you check one of these out. And that gets us to drive pedals. And as you can tell, I'm a little bit of a collector when it comes to the ELECTRO-HARMONIX Big Muff. And it goes back to this pedal, which I bought right around 1979 when I started studying with Joe Satriani, because Joe had one of these. Now, the configuration of the knobs here is why they call that the Triangle Big Muff. And ELECTRO-HARMONIX reissued that pedal, I think 2 years ago. That's this guy. This one, the reissue of the Ram's Head Big Muff, came out in, you guessed it, 2019. Now, the interesting thing is, it's got plenty of fuzz, lots of wooliness to both of these, but this guy, in terms of the frequency spectrum from high to low, kind of the frequency center point, if you will, of the fuzz for this pedal is a little bit higher than this one. It makes this one a little bit woolier because of where the EQ of the center point, center frequency, if you will, of the fuzz is. But this guy has plenty of Big Muff to go around. And as you might have expected, I'm going to do a video comparing and contrasting these two. Both great pedals. In 1977, I bought my first two classic rock records. They weren't classic then, actually. But one of them was Led Zeppelin 1. And as of late, I've been completely infatuated with Jimmy Page's sound on songs like Communication Breakdown, where it's kind of fuzzy on the bass strings, but the treble strings are nice and clear. Rumor has it that's because of a pedal he was using called the Univox Unidrive UD50, which is where the mojo for the SKREDDY pedals LZ129 comes from. So again, it's got kind of a little bit of a fuzz sound on the bottom strings, but nice and clear on the top strings. The original pedal was designed, as I understand, to be run into a loud amplifier, which is how it got that characteristic. This pedal, with the addition of the clipping switch that Mark Alf's put on here, allows you to get that vibe on a clean amp. And I ran this with this guitar into the clean channel of that amplifier, and I have never heard a sound that was closer to early Led Zeppelin than that vibe. If early Led Zeppelin is your thing, this is your secret sauce. As the name implies, the Collider delay reverb takes the best functionality and sounds from the Nemesis delay and Ventures dual reverb and puts them together in one super compact, ultra powerful box that you can fire up via 9 volts DC. On either side, you've got native MIDI jacks as well as dual 1/4-inch inputs for stereo functionality. As you might anticipate out of the box, you can run your delay into your reverb, or your reverb into your delay, or dual reverbs or dual delays. And with the Neuro app, you can actually run it so you've got independent parallel processing, which is crazy. The tap tempo functionality allows you to toggle between, with this little switch here, 1/4-inch, dotted eighth, and eighth note triplets. Lots of controls to really finely shape your delays and your reverbs. This thing sounds great, super powerful, and ultra compact. Great pedal. The GA60 from A.I.M is one of the most exciting little pieces of gear that came out this year. As the name implies, GA, Guitar Amplifier 60 watts. This guy is 60 watts, will easily power up 2 412 cabinets, bone-crushingly loud. It's got a tone control so you can fine-tune. Maybe you're running your Helix into it or maybe some sort of fly rig. It runs off a 9-volt DC power. This thing is awesome. The only thing that's better than one of these is running 2 of them in stereo, 120 watts. These guys are going to be huge. I love my HX Stomp, but I'm not nearly as big a fan of the ginormous wall wart that comes with it, especially if you're trying to put together some sort of fly rig, which is one of the reasons, in case you haven't heard about the 529HC from Mission Engineering, you're going to probably want to know about it. This right here is the standard package, and of course does not include the HX Stomp. So this is obviously the AC point of connection, and that terminates in a USB-C female connector there, which in turn you would use the dual USB-C male connection on. Or you could plug this in, as you probably guessed, into a rechargeable battery pack. Super cool. You can power your HX Stomp from a rechargeable battery. That's awesome. All right, that guy connects into this guy here. The included dual male 2.5 millimeter barrel connection plugs into here. In turn, the included 2.5 female to 2.1 male there is how you get into there. Nice snug connection there. All right, so the functionality and the size is just huge. You're going to be seeing more of this type of technology from these guys in 2020, so stay tuned. The MESA-BOOGIE Fillmore 100 is a great amp for just a ton of reasons. First of all, there are going to be some people that are going to appreciate the fact that it doesn't have nearly as many knobs as some of the other Boogies out there once you realize it's got 2 identical channels, both of which feature a gain, treble, mid, bass, master, and reverb control, totally independent. Also, each channel, you have 3 different power modes, full, half, and low, and in turn 3 different gain modes, clean, drive, and high. Huge amount of tone sculpting, 100 watts, 12-inch speaker, effects loop. This little switch here is very convenient. If you happen to forget your foot switch, you can toggle between the 2 channels from the face of the amp right there. Super easy to negotiate. It's also a great pedal platform. Now, one other thing I want to point out. Like any great amp, it's going to make you work for it a little bit. That is to say, what you put in, the amp's going to go, hey, you need to go home and practice, or it's going to go, you're having a great night. Sign of a great amp, incredibly musical, wonderful amplifier. The Vox AC30 S1 is a very different AC30, and that's a big part of what I love about it. First of all, I've got an AC30 hand wire that has 1, 2, 3 handles on the top because you need 2 arms to lift it. This thing you can carry with 1 arm, largely because it's got a single 12-inch speaker. My hand wired has 2 independent channels, one for the EF86 and the other for the 12AX7 preamp tubes. This is a single input, single channel amplifier with master volume. It is not necessarily a purist AC30, but I love it. In many ways, and I hope I don't offend anybody if I say this, it's kind of like if Vox put together their best sounding AC30 and it kind of got married with a great sounding master volume Marshall. This is what I think that would sound a lot like. It's got from left to right as you go across the control panel there, it's got volume, reverb, treble, bass, and gain. It's got an effects loop on the back as well as a 16 ohm speaker output. It is a great sounding amplifier. And what I love about it the most, especially when you're using a lot of the distortion in the amp, with a guitar like a Les Paul, volume all the way up, great sounding distortion. Bring the volume down, it cleans up, and is very touch sensitive. Very different AC30, and that's what I love about it. The Quilter Labs Tone Block 202 is a super compact, ultra powerful, feature-rich amplifier with 200 watts on tap, which means you got a ton of headroom if you need it. It's also available with an optional 112 matching speaker cabinet or a 110 cabinet. But because it's got balanced 1/4 inch and balanced XLR outputs on the front and back there, and it's got built-in cab sim and it's solid state, you do not have to use a cabinet if you don't want to, which is very convenient. All right, all the controls along the face here, with the exception of the master volume, work in all the modes we're about to talk about. And I'm going to talk about how this switch impacts the master volume in just a moment. All right, the controls from left to right are gain, limiter, bass, mid, treble, reverb, and master. This little switch right here toggles between FR mode, full range flat response for your modular or for acoustic guitar. This thing sounds great for acoustic. Middle position is full Q, which is a nice round amp. And then all the way over to the right there is in Vint mode, which is designed to sound like a vintage Fender amplifier. All right, now let's just presume we're in the mode where the master volume works. Like a traditional amplifier, master volume down, gain all the way up. That's how you get an overdriven sound. Not super overdriven, but there's gain on tap if you need it. If you want a bunch of distortion, I'd suggest using a pedal, and this is a great pedal platform. All right, now the neat thing is the limiter, especially if you're playing with the acoustic guitar, sounds great. It just kind of makes things a little flatter and fuller in a really nice way. It just makes it so the really loud trebly notes don't kind of pierce as much. And it also impacts any tubby notes on the bottom end. That's why it's more limiting than compression. Tone controls work great. The reverb sounds great. Now, the important thing is it's got an effects loop. The reverb is after the effects loop. There's one important thing to keep in mind. You can use the power amp in, the return that is on the loop, to run backing tracks. But the reverb is going to work on those backing tracks as well. So if you want to use reverb on your amp here, if you add it and you're using backing tracks, it's going to add it to the backing tracks as well. So maybe you just want to back that off or not use it, or use some sort of reverb pedal of your own. Right, now the master volume. When this little toggle here is over here in pre-mode, this balanced 1/4 inch out to either run to the PA or to your DAW will not be impacted by the master volume. It's pre-master volume. But when it's over here to the right, it's basically in headphone mode, and you're going to control the volume with this. Now, here's the thing. To my ear, the balanced XLR out sounds much closer to the sound coming out of the speaker than this guy when it's in pre-mode. So my suggestion would be to use the balanced XLR if you're going to be running into a PA or to your DAW. Here's the one drawback about that, is that if you adjust your level on stage, it's going to impact what's coming out front of house or into your DAW, so you just want to keep that in mind. A ton of functionality, and again, the fact that you don't have to use a speaker cabinet if you don't want to is awesome. The Fender ToneMaster Deluxe Reverb is an amp that's defied a lot of people's expectations, mine included. When I heard that they were coming out with a digital version of this amp, I had to check it out, and I've been super impressed. The controls on the face of the amp behave just like a traditional Deluxe Reverb, but there's a bunch of stuff happening on the back that is just awesome. First of all, the amp is technically rated at 100 watts, but it sounds at full volume like the traditional Deluxe Reverb 22 watts. But there's a 6-way rotary switch on the back of the amplifier that goes from the 22 watt setting all the way down to a 0.2 watt setting. Now, the reason that's valuable is if you turn the volume control up to about 6 or 7, you get that traditional Deluxe Reverb growl, but now you can get it with the rotary switch on the back at any volume, even bedroom volume. But if you need to actually run this thing on a truly silent stage, the standby switch, when the standby switch is disengaged, the amp runs like normal, and the power indicator turns red. When you engage the standby switch, the power indicator turns kind of a yellow amber color, and the amp goes into mute mode. But it passes signal out through the balanced XLR that has 3 different settings. One that you can have with no cab simulation, so in case you want to use your own IR in your DAW. Another that's got a SHURE SM57 IR, and another that's got a Royer 121 IR. This thing sounds great, it feels great to the touch, and if you haven't had a chance to check one of these out, I'd strongly suggest doing so. The REVV D20 is the most innovative amplifier I've ever played. On the surface, it looks like a very innocent 20-watt amplifier powered by a pair of 6V6s. You can power it down to 4 watts with that button if you need to. And this button here is where the magic really starts. That toggles whether the master volume is pre or post the XLR output. This little guy right there is a 6-way rotary switch that allows you to choose one of 6 IRs. So when you're running out of the XLR, you no longer need to mic up a cabinet to get amazing tone coming out of your tube amplifier. Even better, it has a reactive load built into it. So if you don't want to use a speaker cabinet, just disconnect the cable from the back of this thing and you're good to go. All right, there's more. On the back here, there's also a USB jack. You can run this into your computer, and then using 2Notes Torpedo remote software, you can tweak the IRs that are in here and load your own IRs on here, as well as create a library of sounds. Just amazing functionality. Now, this little switch right here, it's push-pull functionality on the gain control. This does not have as much distortion as, say, a REVV generator, but it does have plenty of gain on tap. But it's also a great pedal platform in case you need to use higher gain distortion pedals into it. But this is just got a great natural clean tone. You can get plenty of overdrive, even a distortion in it, but it's just a wonderful sounding amplifier. So separate from all the technological stuff, it sounds great. Now this afternoon what I did is I came out of the XLR out into Pro Tools, and then I pulled up my favorite Universal Audio plugins, and I got some of the best guitar tone I've ever heard, literally just running out of the back of this into Pro Tools. What this does is nothing short of amazing. The Line 6 Powercab 212 Plus is a very unique piece of technology. All right, first of all, it's 500 watts. If that's not loud enough for you, you might need to have your hearing checked. All right, it's got a pair of 12-inch speakers, and it's true stereo. And what's neat about that is not only can you load IRs in there, it has what's called speaker modeling. So just in the same way a Helix has amp modeling, what they've done is they've taken models of the classic speakers that are out there. So you can virtually load a Celestion greenback, a Celestion blue, and mix the two of them together. But there's even more cool stuff happening kind of in the back where there's a pair of XLR out jacks. What you can do is you can assign a virtual, for example, Royer 121 and a virtual SM57 to the output, so you can send that out to front of house or to your DAW, which is absolutely super cool. Yes, again, it will load IRs. It has USB connectivity, so you can load up the Powercab editor. It has native MIDI, so you can control it with some pedal board switching thing, but it also has L6 Link, which speaks to your Helix. This thing is super fun to use, and again, with 500 watts, if that isn't loud enough for you, maybe you need 2 of them. I have a lot of love for Tech 21 because they're essentially the first company that ever hired me to do gear demos, which was for the Power Engine 60. I ran a bunch of different modelers into that. This is the Deuce Deluxe, which has replaced the Power Engine 60. It's 200 watts versus 60. It's got a 12-inch speaker and a tweeter that's defeatable via the switch in back. It's got 3 band EQ, treble, middle, and bass. Got volume. It's got a high-pass filter and a low-pass filter. It's got a pad in case you want to use it with your bass and have active pickups. And it sounds every bit as good for bass as it does for guitar. In many ways, this is really designed to be a modeling or preamp amplifying powered speaker cabinet. But on its own, the bass into there sounds great. Now, the Helix into there, wow. The first thing that I noticed, especially compared to the Power Engine 60, which I always loved, the low end out of this thing is awesome. I was like, that sounds and feels like a 412 cabinet. This is great. I'm also going to make one other suggestion. Head on over to the product page on Sweetwater, and as of the time this video was shot, all 7 reviews had 5 stars. That is very rare because if you think about it, you stick 7 musicians in a room, at least one of them's going to go, it was okay. I didn't like the logo plate. Yeah, I didn't like the logo plate. This thing rocks. All right, the last thing I want to say, I've got microphones here. The bass tone on this thing is ridiculous. And as much as I love recording bass direct, there's nothing like capturing the sound of an amplifier. And this thing sounds great. I would suggest putting an SM57 on the edge of the dust cap and on one of the 2 ports in the back, mic it up with a 421. Just remember to flip the phase on one of these guys. This thing is awesome. The Celestion F12 X200 is the first speaker Celestion has made for IRs/modeling devices. And they're awesome. I've got them loaded in these Power Engine 60s, like a traditional 12-inch. I think they took a little bit of break-in, but they sound and feel great. Celestion likes to call them, instead of FR, they like to call them FR-LR. Full range, live response. So here's the deal. I own 16 412 cabinets, all of which have Celestion speakers in them. So in addition to loading them in here, I'm getting ready to do a demo where I'm going to load them into these 2 412 cabinets behind me, as well as a number of other different cabinets. Because the thing is I love IRs, I love the modeling experience. What I miss is actually playing out of a 412 cabinet, and that's what these speakers are going to enable me to do. They sound great in here. I can't wait to put them in the 412 cabinets. The WAZA tube amp expander is an incredibly powerful piece of gear that is going to allow you to solve a number of the classic problems you have with tube amps and cloak those solutions with a huge amount of functionality. That functionality includes the ability to add great sounding effects, an effects loop, solo boost, the ability to write those things to presets and in turn recall those presets from something like the GAFC. All right, let's back up a little bit and talk about some of the problems it solves. Your classic tube amplifier, like this Vox or the Marshalls behind me, or even some modern high-gain amplifier, to get it into the zone where the power amp section starts to provide that classic warmth, you got to turn it up louder. You're going to get away within your average venue. Additionally, classic amps like these guys don't have an effects loop. So once I get that amp to that certain point where there's enough drive, distortion, and so on, without an effects loop, if I want to use a delay, running into the front end of the amp doesn't really work for the sound I'm going for. So because of that, you're now out of luck 2 times over. Enter the WAZA tube amp expander. All right. Part of this leverages the ability to mimic what happens in terms of the way that a tube amp interacts with a speaker cabinet. And that is what comes out of the speaker jacks. The other part of this allows you to basically take the vibe of this guy and then connect that with cab emulation or IRs, and in turn use that to come out straight into the front of house console or to your DAW. Now, there's a bunch of effects that are built into here. Series parallel effects loop, if you want to use something like an SD3000, but only want the wet signal, use the parallel mode there. That sort of functionality is awesome. Now, in terms of how you control all of that, this is where the USB jack on the back of here and the deep editor that comes bundled with this is so valuable. You've got this point where the signal chain splits off. One side goes to the power amp and the other guy goes out to the front of house. You can use one or the other or both. But as you might imagine, kind of keeping track of what's going on with those two signal chains is a little bit hard to track from the face of the unit, which is why the deep editor is so valuable. To have that visual representation of where they're the same and then where they split off is incredibly valuable in terms of having a strategy about what you're going to place where in your signal chain. Again, it also just gives you a visual representation of like, this is what's going on. There's no guesswork. In turn, you're able to store presets into a library of sounds. So say, for example, I've got an AC 30 gig. I can push my 10 favorite presets from my library in the deep editor up to here. Or I've got a Marshall gig. I can do the same thing with my Marshall presets. Also, there is a solo function here, which the deep editor allows you not only to choose how much of a boost there is, but also change the EQ of that. So say, for example, your average rhythm tone, maybe it's a little bit too bright for solo. You can manipulate that from inside the deep editor. The functionality it adds in the process of solving these problems is huge. This unit is nothing short of amazing. I'm a huge fan of the D'Addario modular snake. That's how I've connected the mic runs in this room and in turn how I tie into my upstairs studio as well as the amp closet up there that I use for isolation. Now traditionally these guys have terminated into either a balanced quarter-inch, AES EBU, male XLR or female XLR, which means you're kind of limited with the type of run that you've got. And in 2019, my friends at D'Addario came out with this breakout box. This has got female XLRs on this side and combi jacks for female XLR as well as quarter-inch. This adds a huge level of functionality to something that's already been working really well for me. This stuff is awesome. If you're into IRs and don't know about the MIKKO plugin from ML Sound Lab, prepare to have your mind blown. It is a standalone application, but arguably is best used inside your favorite DAW as a plugin. Because it's a VST AU plugin, if you want to use it inside of Pro Tools, you need to use some sort of wrapper like the DDMF that I found out about from a video by Dave Pensato. Thank you, Dave. So basically you got your guitar going, either using some sort of modeling device or some sort of modeling plugin, or you're using a reactive load on your favorite amplifier. Once you're inside your DAW, you instantiate the plugin. You can mix and match any number of a growing library of cabinets as well as 9 instances of 7 different virtual microphones. You can pan that across the stereo spectrum. The impedance section here allows you to kind of either dial out or dial in or hyper tweak the relationship between the speaker cabinet and the power amp section like we talked about in the video with the WAZA tube amp expander. You can tweak that inside here. There's this little graph here that gives you a visual representation of what that does frequency-wise. There's also the equivalent of a low pass and a high pass filter, so you can really fine tune your sound. Then once you've kind of tweaked your sound to perfectly fit into that track, you can export that as an IR to load into something like the WAZA tube amp expander or your favorite modeling device. This thing is nothing short of amazing. If you're into IRs, you gotta check this out. I've known Dave from ISOACOUSTICS for quite some time, and all my studio monitors use his isolators. Basically what they do is they remove the reflection that comes up through surfaces when you get sound going through them and they get excited, and that in turn comes up into the speaker and compromises the fidelity of your sound. The other thing that happens is when a speaker starts resonating, it can begin to send sound down into whatever surface it's on, and collectively that creates what he refers to as smear. This solves that problem, and the Stage One board with isolators on the bottom does the same thing for your gear, which is why you see them all over my studio. So if you think about it, you're on some giant stage. The drummer's got his kick drum, boom. There's subs underneath the stage, it's vibrating. And your poor amplifier, you're hearing the springs, not that this one's got springs, but they're just kind of going, and in fact, as I understand, there's a very famous guitar player, whose name I can't mention, kind of was behind this thing getting invented because their reverb kept going off on these different stages because of the reverberation from other instruments on the stage, including bass. This thing works great. It isolates your amplifiers, your treasured amplifiers, from the various different surfaces that they sit on so you can get the actual sound of your prized amplifiers. Awesome. The PRESONUS Eris E8 XT have replaced my much loved PRESONUS Eris E8s. I got the E8s in a couple of years ago to review, and I plugged them in and I was like, wow, these sound great for guitar. Warm on the bottom end without being overly present. Great mid-range that's not pokey, and treble that is audible without it being harsh. And my favorite thing about them is whatever kind of sound sources I put in, because most of my time I'm just miking up or taking some sort of guitar signal and bringing it in. They are very true to whatever the original source audio is. I love that about them. These guys have taken that same thing and only made it better for a couple of key reasons. First of all, they've got what's called a waveguide that on the y-axis is now reduced to 60 degrees, and on the x-axis has been expanded to 100 degrees. So let's say you're sitting in the sweet spot, which is now wider. You can kind of turn over and start messing with your outboard gear, and you're not out of the sweet spot. But by reducing the way that the sound is dispersed on the y-axis, you're reducing the reflection off your ceiling and off the floor. Now, one of the other things that they've got on here that is a continuation from my Eris E8s is some treatment for the environment that you're in. There is a 3-position switch that when you kind of have your speakers in an open space like this, you don't need to engage. Then if you kind of get close to a wall, there's a -2 dB drop that cuts out some of the low end. And then finally, there's a -4 dB if you happen to be in a corner where you get a lot of bass buildup. There are treble and bass controls that sound great. I leave them flat. 140 watts each. Obviously, there are 2 ways, judging by looking at this guy. There you go. And again, they're super warm. They're great value for the money. I've been super impressed. If you're looking for some near-field monitors, check these out. I obviously have a few Rode products, especially in the content creation realm. These guys are awesome. And out of frame here is the brand new NTG5. When I heard this was coming out, I messaged my contact. I was like, please send me one. I absolutely love this. A little bit of a talk here about why I prefer, as a guitar playing content creator, why I like to use a shotgun versus a lav. A lavalier, traditionally, you attach it to your shirt. First of all, it looks bad. Second of all, if you happen to wear any kind of necklace or anything, it's clacking against it. Then if you turn to your left to look at the guitar neck or tune while you're talking, you're now off axis. If you bring your head down, all of a sudden it gets louder because of proximity effect. Shotgun mics do not have that problem, so I can literally, hopefully without banging into anything, move over here, and the sound is still extremely consistent. Obviously, I'm looking at the mic there. All right, true to form, this thing comes with some very cool accessories. This little kind of, I don't know what you call it, but it's a handle for the shotgun. It's got this little dongle here and then XLR out there. If you're working remotely, this enables you to get the shotgun nice and close to your subjects, especially if you're doing something like videotaping at like a trade show where there's a lot of background noise. That's one of the other great things about a shotgun mic. It rejects a lot of the off-axis sound. Now, it also comes with the ever-famous dead cat. I'd love to meet the person that named these, by the way. And it also comes with a bag so you can kind of keep this thing nice and clean as you're out on location. I have been super impressed with the quality of it. It's super light, so in case you have to use it on a boom pole, it makes it very manageable for that. If you are in the guitar playing video content realm, check out the NTG5. The Roland VR1HC is an incredibly powerful vehicle for guitar playing content creators like myself. What we're going to do is we're going to do a mock demo to kind of walk through the feature set. But before we do that, I want to give you a very brief rundown of the I/O. You have a trio of selectable HDMI inputs. There's a trio of HDMI outputs, the third of which is always routed to HDMI 3, which for the sake of our mock demo is going to be associated with this little shot here. All right, obviously you've got a jack there, a combi jack on the top that you can use with a gooseneck. There's another combi jack on the side there. You have selectable fan and power, but when it's on, it's for both microphones, so keep that in mind. There are also some RCA jacks in case you want to run in from a mixer. Also RCA output jacks to run into a PA. All right, the trio of HDMI outputs allow you to do a number of different things. One of which is mirroring all this stuff here for a live presentation. In turn, you can have that same image going out streaming using the USB 3 output. Those are going to have identical images and you can run them at the same time, which is very cool. So if you're making a presentation to a room full of people, but you want to stream it at the same time, this enables you to do that very easily. All right, for our mock demo, input 1 is going to be this camera. Input 2, the down the neck shot. Input 3, the up close and personal HX stomp shot. Input 1, I'm talking to you about this guitar thing I'm about to play. I jump over to the down the neck shot and I play it. Come back to input 1 and we're talking about it. Then I'm going to go, hey, I want to show you how I set up this tone over here. Still on input 1, I'm using HDMI input 3 here to feed the signal to HDMI output 3, where I've conveniently set up a monitor over there that you can't see, but while we're on input 1 and I'm talking to you like this, I'm saying, hey, we're going to be using this thing over here. This is how I dialed up this tone. And as I'm talking about it, I'm not just looking over here, I'm looking at that courtesy monitor there, making sure my hand's not messing up the shot. Then when I'm ready to switch, I select that, I do whatever switching I want to do over here, and I come back here. Incredibly convenient to use, yet incredibly powerful. This is going to be a game changer for me in 2020. If you're interested in creating content as a guitar player especially, I would strongly advise checking one of these out. I spend an awful lot of time in the studio recording guitars, and my go-to microphone for several years has been the ROSWELL Pro Audio Mini K47. It does a phenomenal job of capturing the essence of so many amplifiers in this room, like my vintage Reverb, which has all this great stuff happening on the low end, in the mid-range, and the sheen on the top end, that having one microphone that you can point at that amp and capture all of that, it's kind of like the, if you will, the unicorn of microphones. That said, there was one particular amplifier and setup that just kind of, this thing couldn't capture that entire range. And that's why I'm so excited about the Mini K87 from ROSWELL Pro Audio. It has more low-end capacity of picking up from said microphone, which means instruments like this into the JP2C. Although I've recorded a bunch of 7-string with this, there's so much information that's happening on the bottom end with this amplifier that to capture that, the mid-range, and all the stuff that's happening on the top end, again, if you listen to John Petrucci's right hand, there's all this articulate treble information, but if you listen to his bass strings, it's huge, tight, but yet still there is just a massive amount of low end going on, and capturing all of that with one mic is really hard. Again, the Mini K87 is perfect for that, so between these two microphones, I'm totally covered. Shure's contribution into the recording world is nothing short of iconic, and obviously I have a few SM57s. Now the thing that they've done really well is made the transition into a modern guitar player's lifestyle brand without compromising the integrity of who they are. They're with me every day at the gym, and when I'm out doing remote content capturing, they're with me via the MV88 Plus. This thing is awesome. The microphone is the star of the show as well as the bundled app. It is perfect for getting great sounding audio. Now it also comes bundled with this very cool little Manfrotto stand that you can adjust the angle of the stand via this ball head and this little button right here. This thing is great if you're going to shoot some content on your own. It is just a phenomenal product. The day that I shot the Helix Take a Swim video, this is what I was using to kind of capture the beach and the airplanes overhead, which by the way, normally that audio would completely blow out your iPhone. Sounded great on here. Then after that was done, I put on a suit and I went to a For Hire video event. The best footage I got was using this rig just going shh. And when I do For Hire work, people expect a lot. I'm not the greatest videographer, but the quality of the companies that hire me is so high that they expect the quality of what I output to be super high. So this was really the star of the show for me on that day as well. If you're looking to do content creation, whether it's in your studio or out and about, the MV88 Plus is awesome. So after all the talk about my Helix taking a swim in the San Francisco Bay, that gets us to the SKB case. This thing, first of all, is built like a tank. But what's really neat about it is it's designed with the musician in mind. It's got a trio of cubbies that I use with some, hopefully, organizational intelligence. And the first one, I put my power cable. That's the first thing I'm going to reach for. Down below here, underneath where the Helix would sit, that's where I put my XLRs in case I'm going to need them. And then back here, I've got my instrument cable. As you close the top up, there are 6 different latches that when you close them, the latch actually sits inside a channel, which more or less makes it airplane proof. When it's protected by that channel, the folks at TSA and the airplane, as much as they're amazing people that work really hard for a living, they're in a hurry, and sometimes gear gets destroyed in that hurry. Good people though, right? All right, so the deal is this thing is brilliantly designed. It's also got this little pop-up handle and wheels. If you've ever tried to carry one of these for an extended period of time, they start to get heavy very quickly. This thing is brilliantly designed with the musician in mind, and it literally survived a swim with my Helix in it in the San Francisco Bay. You're still there? Oh, okay. Well, first of all, thanks for hanging out for the entire video. You're a rock star. Second of all, speaking of video, I'm going to be producing a ton of content in 2020. So I've got a couple of asks. One, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. And please remember to ring the bell so I can let you know when new videos go online. 2, going to be doing some very interesting things in 2020 on YouTube. Please tell your friends. I've been doing this for a long time, but I'm now kind of starting my own channel, kind of like with some serious ideas about what I want to do and serve the guitar playing community. And as a fellow member of the guitar playing community, I want to contribute towards making your guitar playing experience better. And part of what helps me be able to do a better job of doing that is having more people involved, so manufacturers continue to send gear like the stuff we've covered in this video. All that said, just want to say thank you for hanging out. Also want to say have an amazing 2020, the decade that we've celebrated with this gear coming to a close. It's been a great decade for gear. Imagine what we're going to get this year and the decade to come. Awesome. Thanks again for hanging out. Cheers.